Hi everyone, Alison Hartson here. I just recently ran for United States Senate here in California against Dianne Feinstein, also formerly National Director of Wolfpack to Get Big Money Out of Politics, and public high school teacher for 10 years, and lifetime advocate for progressive policies that put people and planet and policy over party, politics, and profit. And I am joined here with
Roza Calderon. Hi. I'm Roza Calderon. I was running for Congress up here in District 4 against Tom McClintock. I was the only unbought candidate running, and of course, as the story goes, if you're progressive and you know it, you might not win. So one of those, that's what we're going to be talking about today is the challenges that we are facing as progressives and how we can really turn that around. My background is an activist and I'm a scientist as well, and I'm also a single mother and a refugee who came here to the US as a child. So that is some of my background.
Rosa. I don't think I knew that about you actually.
Really?
Yeah. Your parents brought you here from where?
From El Salvador. So basically during the Civil War that was really being funded, through this regime change that the US was funding. My mother, actually, there was an assassination attempt on her life. She chose to leave immediately after that and really left my sister and I behind with my grandmother, not knowing if she would ever see us again. She had to cross every border on foot until she reached the US and asked for asylum, asked for political asylum. And about, as that process went through, I think about 3 or 4 months later, my sister and I followed. I was 2 years old. Um, it's one of the saddest things that probably has ever happened to my mom. She really doesn't like discussing it because of the background, everything that she saw that brought us here today. But we were given a second chance.
Do you remember it? I know you were so young. And I think about it because right now this whole um what's happening right now with immigration and the children being taken from their parents, and there's a lot of talk about how much trauma this can cause even
Oh yeah.
an infant. And even if you don't consciously remember it, I think you can still definitely be traumatized. Do you remember it being that young?
There are snippets that I remember. My sister remembers more. She's 4 years older than I am. But we do. We remember when we finally reached the border in San Diego, and we were kept in a detention center immediately until our paperwork was processed. And I do remember, the tiny rooms, the bunk beds, the amount of children that were in the same rooms, because they would place you in interview rooms. But outside of that, I don't remember too much. What I do remember is not being able to go back to our country for, a number of years. I think it was 93 before we went back, and it was just for the election after the war ended. But um, overall, traumatizing, especially, as children, you really don't have a place where you belong. Here in California, I'm constantly asked where I'm from, and I personally feel that I have a California accent, but I'm always being asked like where I'm from, and I always say I'm from California. It's the only place that I have ever known to be my home. But what they're really asking is what country do I come from, and that's El Salvador.
Are you American?
Yeah, are you really American? Are you really from here? And on the flip side, I've gone to the consulate for El Salvador to ask for my birthright of a passport. And I have been told that I'm not Salvadorian enough, that I don't even know my own heritage. And so you really are in this place of limbo of who am I and where am I really from? If nobody here wants me, nobody over there wants me, then where do I belong? And seeing those images on TV right now and seeing those children, taking care of children, is something that my sister had to do. She had to take care of me while we were in that place. Um, there were siblings everywhere that were doing the same thing, changing diapers. That's one of the things that I've been seeing on there, making sure that their siblings are being fed, or just playing a role of an adult at such a young age. It's unnecessary, and these kids are going through such trauma that making the process even more difficult. it is just an atrocity. And it's the last thing that we as Americans should be promoting, funding, and ultimately doing.
You don't fit into like El Salvador and you don't fit into America in some ways. There's a lot of research about that talks about how people who are working to assimilate here or in any country, quite frankly, become marginalized because they're not accepted in any community, and the problems that causes for those families, for the communities, for people, and just all of the challenges around that. So I mean, I know how difficult and challenging it's been just to simply grow up as a woman in a man's world. I can't imagine on top of that having issues with race and ethnicity, moving from one country to another, especially out of necessity. So I know, at this point, like I know we're off topic and we'll get back to like what we were talking about. But this
Yeah.
is so interesting, and obviously it's very topical because of what's happening right now, with this disgusting legislation or measure that Trump and the Republican regime have pushed forward. And thankfully, it's not all of them. Thankfully, there are Republicans actually who are stepping up and saying, no, this is not actually okay. And there's been a lot of pressure that it looks like Trump is backing down a little bit as of today. But you were out today doing some protests, right? Can you talk about that?
Correct. Yes, so we were doing what's called Freeway Blogger. Basically, we hold huge, huge banners over freeway overpasses to raise awareness, especially for something as enormous as this. You'd be surprised at how many people don't really know what's going on. I was talking to a friend of mine and I said, I just made a joke about this meme that I had seen of Trump and the crisis at the border right now. And they asked, what crisis? And I said, well, it's all over the news. I mean, if you pop onto Twitter or Facebook or any social media platform, it's there, but a lot of people just don't pay attention, so they don't really know. So, standing over the freeway overpasses and putting those signs over the freeway for people to see, it raises awareness. The other thing that it does, it also lets people know that they are not alone in this fight, which I think is equally as important because, as you know, right now, being here undocumented is not the only reason why Trump is going to come after you. They're going after permanent residents and they're going after naturalized citizens. So no one is truly safe. And in the Hispanic community right now, that's at the forefront of the uncertainty of their future, and they don't even know if they're next, because of everything that's happening. So I'm glad to see some Republicans coming forward, but it's not enough. We've heard their stump speeches over and over the past years, and nobody has done any actual moves for true immigration reform. The reason I know this is because I was part of the last immigration reform that ever happened. It was 1989. Since then, we've just been patching up holes instead of doing any actual reform to solve this entire mess that we have with our broken immigration system.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about that a lot too, that, it's really easy right now for the Democrats to come out and punish the Republicans and point fingers at them, but we're also in this mess and we've been allowed to get here because the Democrats have been largely sitting on their hands, and they use human beings, undocumented human beings, as a political football. And it's that's all it is, and it's used as a distraction. It's used as a way to just hang the other party essentially, and instead of actually getting anything done. So I really do hold the Democrats just as much responsible for this as the Republicans. I know that Dianne Feinstein just introduced a bill to keep families together. And
Right.
do you know much about it? Have you read it at all?
So I read some of the bill and I know exactly what they're trying to do, but the reality is that these are the same people that were sitting in Congress when ICE was created. They are the same people that allowed that wording, that verbiage to be part of a policy where if the parents are going to be charged with something, they are not held in the same holding cells or the same detention rooms that their parents are being held in. What Trump did is provide a zero tolerance policy amendment that Sessions sent out that said, everything that we've done in the past, just throw that out the window. This is what we're going to do from here on, which for every single case now, every person is being charged, regardless if they're here actually seeking asylum as refugees, regardless if they actually did cross the border and come over here illegally. So no matter the reason why you are here in the United States at the southern border, you are going to be charged. And that's why it has that feeling of racism, because I don't see that at the northern border. Where are they blocking the Canadians from coming over here? You know, it's an atrocity. Um, and to be honest with you, if I was Canadian, I wouldn't be wanting to come over here right now in the situations that we're in. You know, I was talking to my daughter last night about this, and I said I couldn't do it. I couldn't do what my mom did. I couldn't, even in the face of desperation. I don't know how brave I would be to pack up everything, actually pack up nothing, and just leave with the clothes on my back and go to a new country where I had zero idea how I was going to be treated, if I was even going to be able to enter, if I was ever going to be able to see my kids again. Would I have the courage to do that? And that is some of the things that these people are doing right now. It's not just like, hey, we're packing up, it's vacation time, let's go, we're gonna, live off the fat cat in the United States. It is absolutely desperation. Worldwide, we have over 65 million refugees, people who've been displaced from their homes for environmental reasons, for wars, for famine. I mean, so many reasons. And some of those reasons were wars, for regime changes that the US government is actually funding, that they actually have a hand in. And once we create those refugees, the humanitarian crisis, then we're saying, hey, you deal with it on your own, go home. But there is no home to go back to.
Exactly. And I said the same thing throughout my campaign, that we as a country have to take responsibility for a lot of the impoverished conditions that we have contributed to. I'm not saying it's 100% our fault, but we have absolutely had a hand in so many throughout the world. And so to take responsibility for that, to me, means full amnesty. Give people who are here a clear path to citizenship. And then we need to reform our policies to get there, because it's such a mess. It's so convoluted. There isn't a parent I have ever met, immigrant or not, we could argue we're all immigrants, but there isn't a parent I've met that would ever take the risks that you just described without there being a good, really, really good reason. Absolutely. And for anybody to say, I can't believe a parent would do that, I would never do that, is coming from an extreme place of privilege.
Absolutely.
Because you have no idea what these people are going through. And to me, it's kind of amazing that a parent could say that and not at least have that empathy of, wow, like for somebody, and I don't have kids, but I can at least empathize enough to say, yes, like you at some point in your life as an adult that there are just some things you can't know until you've been through it. And I know that because I've never been through that, I can't judge the parents who come over here with their kids. I worked in a low-income community as a high school teacher. So I guess I do have some perspective there, because so many of my students were brought here by their parents. Mm-hmm. And they had story after story about the struggles and the risks that their parents took coming from Mexico and Vietnam in particular. Just right. Heartbreaking and heartwarming stories as well. And so, are there some people who game the system? Of course, there's people who game every system. It's like human nature. Yeah. But we know that, like, by and large, it is people who absolutely need to be here. And I feel that it's our responsibility to continue to move forward in like the most compassionate way possible as a society. So it's beyond disgusting and heartbreaking what's coming out right now, but I'm glad that it's coming out, and it's like a volcano that needs to erupt in a way so people see what's really been going on. Because even though there's this zero tolerance policy, what's been happening has, to people who come to this country, especially from Latin America, is not necessarily new. And now we have to like look ourselves in the mirror and have that discussion as a country.
Right. Yeah, and I have to be completely honest, the Hispanic community, the Latin American community has really lost their faith in the Democratic Party. Um, when we had Obama, most of the Hispanic community calls him deporter in chief, because what he did was deport over 2 million people in a short span of time. And
More than any president.
more than any president before him. And this is coming from a Democratic president who requests and requires that Latinos and minorities and any immigrant group comes out and votes for them. And it's like, how can you? How can you put that aside after knowing that maybe some of your family members were part of that group that were deported? There's people who came here even from El Salvador after the earthquakes, after the floods, after so many disasters that have happened down there. The poverty is still there. It's horrible. The corruption from the government, everything that has been left over since that war. Because after the war, it's not like, wow, democracy's here, things are amazing, life is amazing. Let's just become a first world nation. It's still a third world country and still facing a lot of things. And so Latinos have lost their faith in the Democratic Party. Everybody keeps saying that these next few elections will be on the shoulders of the Latinos, but we're not coming out to vote because there's nothing to vote for. There's nobody there out there who's inspiring.
The obviously openly racist Republicans, the way they talk about people of color, but they don't want to vote for the Democrats who actually have been more responsible for deporting and also like expanding Republican wars throughout the world.
Yeah, and you see that in the pictures, the pictures that people keep saying, oh, you're putting pictures from 2014. Yeah, they are pictures from 2014. That was happening in 2014 when there was an even bigger mass migration, this mass exodus from Central America, coming to the border, asking and begging for help. Those cages have been in place since then and before then. These are detention centers where people are treated with even less rights than animals because they don't actually have any rights, period. You have children that are going to hearings on their fate, through the immigration court system, and they're being sent home without an interpreter, without their parent being present, and there's nothing that anybody's doing about it. So, as I continue to say, Trump has been a blessing in disguise because if it wasn't for him, this type of activism wouldn't be out there right now. The fights that we are putting huge fires out by just mobilizing hundreds and thousands of people to see what's truly happening within our government that has just been masked with this. We have checks and balances, we have three branches. That does not happen. It's just not enough.
People come out like when the other side is doing it and when the corruption or when the atrocities are blatant. And I think that's really attributed to human nature as well, in terms of when something directly affects our lives. There's research that shows this, like that's when we get active. It's unfortunate, and I want us to figure out a way that we can help our society get more involved in politics and stay involved even when things seem to be a little bit more tame, because it's during those tame moments that those in power take advantage.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what happens. So when we can start to help like inform people better about that, how important it is to really hold your own party accountable. I said to somebody online recently, if we would all focus on holding our own party accountable, we'd probably make a lot more progress a lot faster instead of just finger pointing. Right. And so and we'll go through this when we go on to talk about the reflection of this primary election that we just got through. But in the last midterm election, which was in 2014, we had the lowest voter turnout in something like 16 or 18 years.
Correct. Yeah, I saw that.
And why is that? I would say it's because Obama was president and people were comfortable, and we actually ended up having a higher turnout during this primary than the average that we've had over the last 16 or so years. Why is that? Because we're a democratic state. We're mostly progressive, and Trump is in office, and people are freaking out about Trump, as they should be. But like you said, it's like now that you can see the devil, right? The devil, the devil, what is that saying? Like now that you can see the enemy, now you come out. So what does that do? It gives us a Democratic president, another Obama in 2020, and then people go back to sleep and the same stuff keeps happening. We're just not as active and aware of it, So it's problematic. And a lot of the stuff that was done during Obama's reign has led to some of the policies that the Trump administration is just using the same stuff that they've done.
Admittedly, Rosa and I got a little distracted with this very important issue, but join us next time as we break down the overall results from the 2018 midterm election and what we can expect going into the general election in November. Are we, California, as progressive as we like to say we are?